just coming in. Oh no, there's IT is here. Do I need to turn it off and turn it back on again? In Perth. All right. Okay. Leave it on just in case they phone back up again. We just can't, Perth are conspicuous by their absence, but we don't know if they're there or not because we can't see them. Anyway, welcome to Grand Rounds, including the people who are struggling at the end. Welcome. My name's Tom Forden and I'm the chair and organiser of Grand Rounds. I appreciate you all coming in summer. Numbers do dwindle as the summer goes on because of school holidays particularly and looking after kids, etc. And we don't have any students at the moment because they're either finished, waiting to be doctors, or they're off doing whatever students do, unspeakable things somewhere. So it is a sort of compact and bijou Grand Round as the summer goes on, but there are 3 more Grand Rounds, this one and 2 more before we finish. So thanks for coming, and do consider coming to the next couple. Particularly next week, which is hosted by Professor Sarah Brown, who coordinates the Academic Foundation Programme. So our Academic Foundation trainees will come and present the work they've been doing over the last couple of years. It's always very interesting. They do quite a diverse set of things, and it's great because you can throw horribly mean questions at them and see how they cope, or a tomato perhaps. And then in the last week, we've got one of our associate specialists who's going to come and talk on behalf of the group of associate specialists, and they are an increasingly large group that helps support everything we do and prop up our services, and they're going to come and talk about the things that they get up to in terms of research, service development, and if you are a junior doctor, I can't say that anymore, a doctor in training, and you want to consider a career as an associate specialist, a non-career grade post, then they'll be able to talk to you about that as well. But this week, patiently waiting next to me is Dr. Michelle Watts, who is our Associate Medical Director for Primary Care. She has asked for a slot to talk about Formulary, the unified formulary across Tayside, something that we're all involved with in some way or another. I've no idea more than that what she's going to talk about, so I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle. Just in case you haven't seen it on the slide, enough times my name is Michelle Watts. I've been a GP in Tayside and worked in Tayside for close on 20 years. And I know you're probably looking at me and thinking, wow, she doesn't look that old, but I am. And I've seen a lot of changes come and go, some of them not so good, but some of them pretty positive, and I'm really keen to come and talk to you today and give you a wee bit of an update around some of the work that we're doing as a whole system across medicines management, and in particular the formulary. I'd like to talk for about maybe 25 minutes or so. I have got slides, I have got pictures, I've got a fancy pointy thing, I've got you with your lunch hopefully, so thank you for giving up your time on a sunny summer lunchtime for doing this. So thinking about the formulary and why we want you to really encourage you to think about using the formulary first, the why, the what and the how, and actually how do you know things are going to be an improvement. So really why bother having a Tayside formulary? Well, it's pretty straightforward from my perspective, is that we want to promote safe, high quality, person-centred, cost-effective prescribing which addresses waste, variation and harm. Now, we can trot these sorts of things out, but we all know every single day as we go about our day jobs, the difficulties that we encounter in trying to make this happen, and particularly across the interface. And for me, thinking about what we do around prescribing, which is an integral part to our clinical care, we have to think about how we do that across the whole system. And I don't think anybody can disagree that the work that goes in to support the formulary produces a really, a quality product with huge integrity that people can trust, actually, and that applies across the whole system. So, we know the national direction around realistic medicine and CMO, who was here in this very lecture theatre not so long ago, really posing some of the challenges around how we do really think about what matters, just not to us as clinicians and professionals, but actually to our patients as well, and how we can actually promote a bit more of a realistic conversation with people around what medicines in particular can and actually can't do to support a patient's journey. And that's us realising that we have to be a bit more realistic around. Sometimes it's not appropriate for a 90-year-old to be on a statin, whether they're in a ward or in a general practice setting, and actually recognising that prescribing for people with chronic pain, only about 50% of people are going to get up to 50% pain relief no matter what you prescribe. And I'll show you why that's important in just a few minutes. So we also need to think about why it should matter and why do we put the work and effort into the formulary. And I really like this because so much of what we seem to be doing in Tayside just now is all around this. Do this and you'll get carrots. Do this and you'll save some money. Here's a new process that we want you to do. But if we don't focus on all of this, then actually it won't be sustainable. And most importantly, it won't be much fun. You're going to get pretty fed up with it quite quickly. And for me, certainly the process around things like formulary and medicines management, we're trying to combine these two things, how we can get a bit of fun out of applying the science and actually making it easier to do the right thing. And I heard a presentation recently by an esteemed professor from America, and he was talking about leadership, and you were talking about carrots and sticks, and he said the only thing between a carrot and a stick is a mule. And I don't know, those of you in the audience, you may remember this game. Do you remember it? Buckaroo. I am a child of the 70s and 80s. And actually that's what it feels like sometimes. It certainly feels like that to us in general practice and primary care, when it's yet another thing, yet another thing, yet another thing, and you just get to the stage you think, right, and everything gets bucked off. And I guess you guys probably feel like that. How many times a day? We'll take a straw poll, probably about 100, I think. So what is it that we can do to make it easier to do the right thing, and that it's not just about being a carrot and a stick approach to encouraging you to use the formulary? So we think having a whole system formulary will really get to the nub of what we want to do as clinicians, and that's around addressing waste, variation and harm, and how we make it easy to do that. So thinking about waste in particular, and this picture here actually is one of the cupboards from one of the wards when they had a tidy out. I was going to suggest it might have been from the doctor's mess, but I don't think paracetamol would do it from the doctor's mess, frankly. But you can just see how much waste that we produce every single day. If you go into any community pharmacy, they're producing several bin bags of that every day, and it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go to third world countries or anything else. It just gets destroyed. Why does that matter? Well, actually, if you look at the Tilly, and here's a picture of our Associate Pharmacy Director, David Coulson. He's rocking a very nice tank top here. He's obviously a child of the 80s as well. But our public campaign around encouraging the public to recognise waste, which they are doing, shows that we're spending around about £1.4 million of our money on waste every single year in Tayside alone. That's an Audit Scotland report that came out last year. And you can see how that translates into really meaningful numbers for you as clinicians when you're working on the ward. So it's just really something to think about when you have that patient in the bed or you see them in the outpatient clinic. Are they really taking the medicines that's intended for them? Is there an element of waste going on? What can you do in your part around that whole patient's journey? Because it really, really does matter. We know that there's a huge amount of work going on around waste and what we can do to support it. There's a big public campaign, and there are patient information leaflets winging their way to you in your outpatient departments in the next few days. We've got good repeat prescribing systems. We're encouraging people to bring their medicines in and out of hospital, medicines reconciliation, and the work that the pharmacy team in particular have been doing for the past few years has been absolutely phenomenal, but it's still producing £1.4 million of waste. When we move on to variation and think about why that should matter and why having a formulary is important, when you think about our variation against the Scottish average in Tayside, we spend £8.23 per person more in Tayside. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? It's not that much, is it? Well, we've got 420,000 people in Tayside. And actually, this is the really scary bit as we get into some of the science. At the moment, this is diabetes, and our predicted long-term condition increase across our 4 main areas over the next sort of 20 years or so. And at the moment, in 2016, for diabetes care, we spend £208.23 per patient. Now, actually, when we compare ourselves to all the other boards in Scotland, we're doing really well, because that's because we work really closely with our Diabetes Magical Clinical Network, with our diabetes clinician, with our medicines advisory group and our area drug and therapeutics committee to really make sure that we only prescribe the most cost-effective medicines. But you can see the increase that we're going to have, and if you're not scared about how that affects your beds, let alone our prescribing budget, it's a really scary statistic. So coming to a ward near you, because here's where we are now and here's where we're going to be in 2020. So, thinking about variation, some of it is actually good and explainable, and I'd like to actually give ourselves a bit of a shout out, because we do some really good work in Tayside here, and I'd like to show some explainable variation where it's a good thing. And this graph at the top here basically shows prescribing for the new anticoagulant rivaroxaban. So most of you will be using this on your wards, and you can see across each of the 3 health and social care partnerships and Tayside as a whole, we are a significant outlier across the rest of Scotland when you compare ourselves to that. But then equally, we're detecting much more atrial fibrillation in the community, and that's the same across all of our chronic disease conditions in Tayside. Our good partnership working across primary, secondary care has allowed us to exploit the GP contract that we've had from 2004 to 2014, and our disease prevalence across every chronic disease area is significantly higher than every other board in Scotland, which may explain why the wards are so busy, because actually we're detecting an awful lot more disease. Why does that matter, and why is that good variation? Well, actually, if you look at our adjusted CVD death rate from stroke, we're significantly lower than the Scottish average. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of other factors here, but there's definitely something to me around good early prescribing, using good cost-effective medicines, using the best available evidence early on and detecting it is producing better outcomes for our patients. So another focus around where producing all of that is really important as well is actually around our liver transplant. We've got one of the lowest liver transplant referrals in the whole of the UK, and that's in large part due to the work of John Dillon and his team and the approach they've taken around eradicating hepatitis C in Tayside, and they're world leaders in this. Now, that's a blooming expensive thing to do because the treatment is expensive. However, it is cost effective and the right thing to do, and we're looking forward to seeing Hep C no longer being a condition in NHS Tayside in the next couple of years due to the treatment and the work that we've been doing to support our prescribing around it. So we've got some really, really good evidence around why variation is good and why we shouldn't be constantly hammered by finance people telling us that just because we're at variance it's a bad thing, because some of it is really good. However, there are some areas where we do have challenges, because I wouldn't be a GP if I wasn't talking about something a little bit challenging. And this is a slide that really shows where we go around our lidocaine plaster prescribing. For those of you who don't know it, it's a sticky plaster containing lidocaine for which there is very little published clinical evidence around its efficacy for anything other than postherpetic neuralgia. Now, postherpetic neuralgia is rapidly becoming a thing of the past. You don't see it very often in elderly people or in younger so much nowadays, because we have a shingles vaccine that we've introduced to elderly people, and we have a really good uptake of that across primary care. Yet we are by far the highest prescriber of lidocaine patches in Tayside, and actually we have the I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but we're apparently the highest based in Europe. Now, I can't see that we've got any more people with shingles or people that have any kind of different pain to any other health board area, but here you go, that's where we're spending 2 million of our hard-earned pounds every year, and that's a variation that really we're finding it a bit more difficult to explain. So how we apply those principles of realistic medicine and prescribing the right medicine. Moving on to harm, and again, why is that important? Well, we could talk all day about all the different work that's going on around patient safety and harm. A lot of it led by our own team, people like Bruce Guthrie from TCGP is again leading a lot of international work around this. The work our Medicine for the Elderly teams and our pharmacy teams have done around polypharmacy and the patient safety programme. Again, we are international leaders into that, and it's all contributing. And here's why it is just so important. We have 6.5% of all our emergency admissions are due to a medicines-related problem. Translate that in your own heads into what that means for you in your ward or in your department or in your outpatient setting, and see how important that is for you, for us to be thinking about this and tackling it. And when we think about the polypharmacy agenda, that's 14,000 people on 10 or more medicines in Tayside. Next time you see them in your clinic or your ward, really be asking yourself, do they need a statin? Is this realistic medicine that we're prescribing here? A good example of actually some of the work we've done around harm, this is the kind of letter that we used to get in general practice until fairly recently, and I don't know if anybody recognises their own handwriting here, I hope not, but really difficult, and we had regular occurrences of harm occurring across the interface because just simply we couldn't read the writing half the time, and took up a huge amount of your time and our time trying to sort it out. Now we've moved to things like our electronic discharge documents, where we can really understand across the interface how processes are supporting good patient care and much safer prescribing. Really fantastic, and the work that we're doing with our outpatient clinics, again, as a board, we're pretty far ahead. I'd like to talk more about that, but I know you guys are in the middle of track care, and I think the more we stay away from all of these technical things, here's one that works really well. So moving on. So that's some of the opportunities that we have been taking, and this picture is a good example for me around how, as a board, as individuals, we can really get on and take some opportunities as well. And this is Sweden. I was just there for 4 weeks and grabbed an opportunity to do an exchange there. Really interesting to find out what they're doing in Sweden around healthcare, and actually across the whole of Europe, because I was there with people from across Europe. We ended up in Dublin. Really recommend it. Health Foundation, please apply for it. Great opportunity. So here's the opportunity around our Area Drug and Therapeutics Committee. You probably won't know much about this, but this is chaired by Professor Colin Fleming. It's co-chaired. There's a very robust process and a number of hard-working, very effective advisory groups that go into it. And at the beginning of the year, the board challenged the Area Drug and Therapeutics Committee to work with Jacob George and the Medicines Advisory Group to do a rapid review of our main formulary chapters and come up with the best available evidence for what we thought should be in a refreshed formulary, where we would be asking the whole system, primary and secondary care, to sign up to using it. Now, we know that the formulary is really well used. You should all be accessing this every day. Does everybody know that you can download it on your iPhone or your Android? Nods, yes, everybody. It's all there, and I'm reliably told you can download it and cache it, and you don't even need to be in a Wi-Fi area. I have no clue what any of that means, but apparently that's a really good thing. So really encourage you to think about using it. And so the team came forward with this your review of the formula. It was a multidisciplinary, multi-agency effort, and we launched the formulary just in April of this year with the support of colleagues across primary and secondary care. And really encourage you, because this is a formulary that's updated regularly. It's got the integrity around it. If you're looking for new guidelines or new pathways where you're looking to prescribe medicines, this is the place to look, and can't encourage you anymore to think about using it. We get the information out, so things like Tayside Prescriber, I usually can't pronounce most of the drugs around here and skip over it pretty quickly, but in the last few months we've also launched a primary care prescriber where we're going out to our colleagues in primary care around some of the prescribing issues and changes as well, and you can see the kind of broad range of areas that we you focus on around drugs. Is about medication and liberation from prison, really important, stops them coming to A&E looking for their drugs. What we're doing around pregabalin, which is now off patent, and actually some of our drug safety updates, so 2 or 3 pages every month produced by a GP for a GP, so working really, really well across the whole system. And now we're beginning to think, and here's the science bit, to get in about how we can use our formulary to really encourage compliance and get in about the data so that we know the money we spend every day on medicines is not wasted, it's the right thing to do. And basically up here is a graph of all the chapters that we prescribe and where we compare. So Tayside's is the highest for all of our formulary chapters, but particularly around our CNS. And if you remember what I told you before, our use of pregabalin and lidocaine plasters, we're the best in Europe at that, and we're really, really good at it, and here's where we spend all of our money. Then when we look at something like respiratory, actually we're one of the best in Scotland at doing well around our respiratory prescribing. But again, when we get in about the details of that, it suggests that there are some areas that we can focus on around respiratory prescribing to make us even better and driving quality. And we're already on the case with that, working across the teams with our respiratory managed clinical network and our respiratory physicians in primary care around addressing that. And in this area around cardiovascular, we're kind of, yes, we're high prescribers, but that's because we're doing blooming well at it, and making a big difference in our stroke and our cardiovascular prescribing. So there, I hope, some compelling arguments for you around why we think using the formulary is really important. And some of the things that are coming forward in the future, discussions have already started about having a national formulary. Personally, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think there'll be an awful lot of posturing, and my formulary is better than your formulary. But our ADTC chairs are leading it. Our pharmacists have a big role to play in it, and it'll be interesting to see what comes out. But I want to make sure that the integrity and the trust that we have in our formulary is absolutely not superseded by something else. We know that innovations like HEPMA are coming, which will make it an awful lot easier for you guys in acute to access your data around prescribing and connect your prescribing with your clinical decision making, and support your care of patients in the wards. Data sets, some of which I've just shown you, and how we can make them much more user friendly so they come to you down at directorate and clinical area, your department level, but also out to our clusters of GPs. So we have 13 clusters of GP practices now across Tayside, and that's groups of practices, about 4 or 5 in each cluster, and they're serving a population of about 30,000 patients within Tayside. So that is a really good mechanism for engaging with general practice in particular around how we can share data and information. And please ask me more about how we can get better interface working across that with our clusters if you would like to afterwards. Things like our assurance reviews as directorates, you're all reporting in on a regular basis around your waiting times targets and all these other stupid hoop jumping carrot things that you've been asked to do. But we'd like to work with you around formulary compliance and some of your data around prescribing and how that could impact on your budgets and how you do your business. And of course anything that we can do to support working across the primary sector care interface. And I think I've described a lot of the things that are going on. So really, in summary, our formulary is clinically led. It really does balance cost, effectiveness and choice. It's quality assured, and most importantly, it's by prescribers for prescribers. So I can only encourage you to really consider using formulary first. It is the right thing to do. Help us to make it easy for it to be the right choice every time. And finally, I'm just kind of you're reminded by some of my heroes. So people like Don Berwick, ex-president of IHI, and he talks a lot about radical new redesign rules for healthcare, and a lot of them are pretty common and sensible about shifting the balance of care. He talks a lot about creating joy at work. And I don't know if any of you guys saw this, but a few weeks ago, Billy Connolly, there was a documentary, and it was actually around Billy Connolly being prescribed. There was a wee section, people with depression and stress and anxiety, instead of drugs, some people were prescribing an hour of Billy Connolly a day, because actually sometimes laughter really is the best medicine. So I'll leave you with this, and it's not on the formulary yet, but we'll have a good process to get it on if you would like. And so hopefully I've left plenty of time for questions, and I'd be really happy to answer anything. Thank you.
Good God, Michelle, we put this on the internet, you know. It goes on for the whole world to see. Anyway, has anyone got any questions? Anyone got any comments about any of that? I sit on our on our respiratory MCN formulary committee, and the chair is hiding at the back over there. We spend a lot of time on this. We spend a huge amount of time trying to decide how many inhalers we put on the formulary, and which one goes where, and which goes first and second. These meetings go on for hours and hours and hours, so it's not like we don't put some effort into this. It's quite nice to see that we're doing pretty well, although we're languishing behind Shetland for some reason, which is currently beyond me.
It's so windy there, they kind of get a breath.
Let me try and turn this on, because there is a question from the audience. Bear with me. Hang on a second, you need to be recorded for posterity. Hello?
That's why I stood here and didn't prance about in front of the screens, which is my usual modus operandi.
Michelle, as you know, I'm interested in the national formulary, and how that's going to pan out initially was a manifesto commitment from the Scottish Government, and no one was quite sure what it was going to turn into, but in recent months it does look like it's going to happen. We've had a good attendance at the most recent meeting from NHS side, and I think there wasn't a great attendance from clinicians elsewhere in Scotland, so it does strike me there's a chance to mould this in the model of NHS side. But I'd be interested in your views on that, and what you think the national formulary can do for GPs, and what the difficulty is going to be. Thanks.
So I think around a national formula it would be quite easy to do about 50% of it. It's all pretty straightforward, we all do the same things, and we know from our own Tayside area formulary about 50% of our formulary choices are for the whole system, about 25% of our formulary choices are specialist directed GP prescribing, and about 25% are specialist only. I think that 50%, with a bit of posturing and arguments about drugs like lidocaine, will get there pretty quickly. It's when it gets into the more specialist areas, and that's where I think it's really important that we go back to the evidence and that we get robust decision making. Our formulary compliance in Tayside, we're currently around about 83%. The national level is about 88%, but I don't put much store on that because our formulary is changing quickly, and I'm really not bothered about the numbers. What I'm really bothered about is the quality of it, and if we get the formulary right, 100% of people will use it first time, and that's my concern, that we might lose some of the quality and some of the ownership if we go to a national formulary, and if it's just about saving money, then sorry, we've just wasted our time here today. It's about quality and safety.
I have just a comment about wasting drugs. This is a personal experience that everyone knows I'm chronically unwell and never here, but I take lots of drugs. I don't take 10, 6, and one of those drugs, very, very expensive, and I went and picked my drugs up from the pharmacy, and I got 2 months worth, and it's very expensive, and I went to see my specialist 2 days later, who stopped it. Not unreasonable, it's fine, I've changed to something else. And I said, fine, you can have this back then, because obviously it's worth a fortune, you should use it. And I could not give those drugs back. I couldn't give them back. There was probably about £1,000 worth of drugs that I'd been given over, and I couldn't give them back. And I tried my best, and I couldn't send them to Africa. and I couldn't use them, I couldn't give them back. So there's problems there, and I appreciate that I may have injected every single one of those capsules with something toxic, but what are the chances?
Yeah. And I would hope that it didn't have too much of a street value as well. Because it is a significant problem, and it's how we get the right balance around our medicines reconciliation, and particularly in general practice and primary care. Because when you're in a clinic and you make a decision to prescribe a drug, you're probably 100% likely that whatever you put on that form now, is what will be prescribed. And we really, really rely on people like our pharmacists and our pharmacy technicians to pick up that information, make sure it is formulary aligned, that it is the right medication, and then it goes on. Because once it goes on a patient's repeat prescription, it can be there for years. And I think that's one of the challenges we have, because as we're all facing the challenges around not reviewing people in outpatient departments, not seeing the same GP all the time, you're losing that continuity of care, and we run a real risk of a large cohort of patients being on some pretty toxic drugs for 20 or 30 years, and that contributes to your 6.5% of admissions into your emergency wards. And it is really important. Drug-related deaths in Tayside were amongst the highest in Scotland, and more than 90% of our drug-related deaths, it was polypharmacy. And yes, it was your heroin and opiates and everything else, but actually in the vast majority of patients it was pregabalin and amitriptyline, trimazepam, diazepam, all of these drugs that we are prescribing at rates that we cannot easily explain.
At the back.
Can I just add on quality? I had a look this morning on the top 20 hits on the formulary, and the drugs are your NOACs, your phenytoin, pregabalin, digoxin. So our drugs with narrow therapeutic index. So people are looking at it for safety to check if those drugs are being prescribed appropriately, which I think is a really good thing.
Yeah, thank you, and that's good to know. And again, if we're linking that into formulary that we know has been regularly updated by a multidisciplinary team, you trust it, and it works really well for you. And I'm really keen to hear from you guys in the audience about how we can get better at these sorts of pathways. So pathways for asthma, your pathways for DVT, your pathways for a lot of these common conditions. We're not good at Tayside in really thinking about how we work across the interface. And if you think that there's a 50% increased risk of harm every time a person crosses the interface, and you know this yourself if you've ever been on your own patient journey, it's a bit scary, and we could make this better by using the formulary first.
Anyone else? You want to comment on that? Trundle back here. Okay then, right, well we'll call that a day, and I'm sure Michelle will be hanging around for a little bit if you have any questions you want to put to her or comments that you don't want to share with the rest of the class. Thanks very much for coming, thanks for your participation. Next week, Sarah Brown with the Academic Foundation doctors. Do come along, it's usually quite a good session, and like I say, you get to throw tomatoes at some junior doctors. Thanks so much for coming, thanks to Michelle.
Thank you guys, and please do keep in touch.